Here's Guy Aitchison, Michele Wortman, and Russ Abbott.
Thank you, Gabe, and thank you, Russ, for joining us. Everyone, welcome to our third episode of Hypercast, where we're talking about fine art in the tattoo world and tattooing and all things related to tattooing that are of interest. Russ Abbott here is a well-known, solid member of our community for a long time, and he's been really sort of one of the spokespeople for the illustrative style of tattooing. I don't want to say he brought it back because it's never faded away, but he's really helped to kind of popularize illustrative tattooing as a well-known style in this trade. And I thought it would be nice to first start out by asking Russ to define what exactly is illustrative tattooing.
All right, great. Thanks for having me, guys. To me, illustrative tattooing is a really broad, style of tattooing. I think it encompasses a lot of different subcategories. To me, if you illustrate something and then you're drawing it, first of all, but for me, I start with a realistic subject matter and kind of put it through a tattoo filter. I started with traditional style, American style tattooing, so I was taught to use, bold lines and solid black and, try to make designs that really worked well and would last and stand the test of time. So, when I started getting into more realistic subject matter, I still had those ideas of what a tattoo should be in my head. And I think, that's kind of how I landed on what my tattoo style is today, just by, wildly experimenting and what always kind of staying true to the ethos of what I think makes a solid tattoo.
So when you say a tattoo filter, you're talking about, obviously the outlines and the shading and things like that. But you definitely have pushed a little bit farther than the most fundamental, basic, traditional style in what you're doing. You've kind of expanded out from there a little bit. And I think this is a hard question to answer, and we'll always be asking this, I'm sure. But what have you discovered in the course of your experiments in terms of what the real limits are? What makes a good tattoo, and when have you stepped over the line?
Well, I've definitely stepped over the line many times. As far as the limitations of tattooing, I think, first and foremost, we're limited by skin and the pigments that we're trying to put in it. People have different skin types, and those skin types react differently with different colors. So, being a good tattooer to me means being able to recognize who I'm working on and what their skin is like, and make decisions about what I'm willing to do on them based on that. So, kind of always trying to push the tattoo that I do on the specific person as far as I think I can take it. So as far as realistic tattoos go, I think, sometimes I think tattooers may be taking it too far and, kind of diving into things that aren't really going to stand my test for a good tattoo. And for me, I'd like to think that if I ran into the client when they were 80 years old, that it would still be a readable image and they'd still be happy with their tattoo. And to me, that's the goal. And I know other tattooers and other clients may have different expectations, and I guess that's fine. It's just about what realistic goals the artist and the client set for the tattoo. So definitely pigments and skin type are a huge limitation for tattooing. Other pitfalls that I've encountered would be maybe, trying to put too much detail into the whole thing. I've learned over time that detail can add a certain amount of excitement to the piece, but I'd rather just kind of make an overall strong image with a nice silhouette and put detail in tiny little moments, so that you still get the effect of people seeing it and going, wow, that's a lot of detail, but I didn't cover the whole thing in, microscopic little things that in the long term can kind of lead to the image being more muddy and take away clarity. So there's a lot of things, little tricks that I use in my work to just make the image more readable, to lead the eye, to add clarity, to add contrast, and just to generally make something that's going to be as bold as possible but still be interesting. How's that?
The first time I heard that term silhouette, the silhouette of a tattoo, that was I think it was Ed Hardy, and I think people will look at that differently depending on where they're coming from. But to me, the silhouette is what you see when you blur your eyes. Which is kind of not much different from what you see, when enough years have passed or what have you. I think one of the places where the waters get muddied a little bit is that, for instance, not all pigments age the same, and the silhouette of a tattoo is actually going to change through the years depending on
where it is,
and if, let's say, the top was done in one pigment and the bottom is primarily another, and they age at different rates, the silhouette is going to change from being balanced to bottom heavy as it ages, just for example. So I think that's one of the things a lot of us are struggling with, because I know that you've done some experimentation with some colored outlines and things like that, and it's nice to see variation in lines. It's nice to see things besides just the same weight of a black line around everything. But at the same time, a lot of people are unsure where to proceed or what's safe to do. When you do step outside of the box, and I know you've done this many times, what allows you to feel comfortable doing it?
Okay, well, I mean, as far as color lines go, I've had a lot of difficulty with orange pigments over the years. And I've seen orange probably from 4 or 5 different brands that was tattooed in my own skin that disappeared within 2 to 3 years. So that would be the first one I would eliminate from the color line category. And I would probably go with a red, because even when you see old men walking around with tattoos, you can still kind of spot that red in there. If I wanted to create a kind of a hot light source, red would be what I would use for the color line. But as far as like what do I look at to try to decide where I'm comfortable? I go on experience of being tattooing now for 14 or 15 years and seeing the work that I did 5-6 years ago starting to fall apart and age, and always kind of check myself and try to just be realistic about what I can accomplish. As far as people that are new to tattooing and are kind of unsure how far they can go, I would say stick to the bold, basic, traditional elements and kind of dip your toe in the experimental water slowly. Try to get around tattooers who are experimenting and get a look at the work that they're doing after it's healed and after it's aged for a little while. Those fresh photos are, sometimes a little bit of a lie, I think. And, I just tend to be on the cautious side.
Okay, you got a new book out, and it's been really well received, and it's beautiful. I know Michele's used it for a couple of projects now, and you had this big Kickstarter, program going ahead of time because you wanted to do a fairly deluxe edition. I guess there was a lot more enthusiasm than you ever anticipated. Want to tell us a little bit about that? I started working on the drawings about a year before the Kickstarter ever came out, and just started, doing a couple of drawings a week and collecting materials. And once I got about 30 or 40 of them, I started trying to look into, what it would actually cost to print the kind of book I wanted. And, I suppose I could have really saved up for, a year or so and done it on my own, but I heard about Kickstarter and I really just wanted to try that new format. And, basically what it is, if people don't know, it's crowdfunding. So you put up a video and you make a project on Kickstarter.com, and then if people are into it, they can back your project. If you don't reach your financial goal, then no one gets charged. In my case, the goal was $10,000, and I reached it in 2 days. So,
wow.
It was pretty awesome. Ended up going all the way to, I think, $49,000 in 30 days, and
Wow.
allowed me to really increase the page count and to make the book as nice as I could, and to keep the cost down for everybody. You know, it retails at $60 with over 100 pages and a cloth bound gold foil stamp cover. So I was definitely able to, you know, kind of take it all the way and do what I wanted with it, thanks to Kickstarter.
Your book is beautiful. I really love the layout of it and the feel of it. I love the fact that it's sort of rooted in classical elements. It's very inspirational and applies to a lot of different languages in tattooing.
Thanks.
Yeah, I like the whole binding and everything too. How you can flip it open and stick it in the scanner. I mean, it's just very practical. Yeah,
it's a cookbook style. It's a concealed wire binding, and you know, from the edge and from the front, you don't see the wires, but when you open it up, you know, it lays flat, so you can copy it easily. And it's got all the line drawings for all the designs. So, you know, this is one of those times where I actually want people to use the book and use the images in the book. And it's been cool. I've seen a lot of people are tagging me on Instagram with the hashtag Ornamental Archive and letting me see the tattoos that they're doing with it.
Nice.
I think it's a great language to share because it encourages people to think more like about flow and form rather than being so literal with just the subject matter itself. Like, it's great to frame anything.
I think one of my favorite pages in the book is there's one where you show a leaf in several different stages of growth. You know, it starts out just cupped, and then it's coiled, and then it's coiled more, and you're kind of showing people there's a thought process you can put into this. You can take any of these designs or any design you find in a Dover ornament book, and you can think this way. You can adapt it. You can grow it in your mind and redraw it in a way that fits around whatever subject matter you're trying to frame off with it or what have you.
Yeah, anyone could appreciate it. It's not. I don't think it's style specific, which is awesome.
Right on. Yeah, I tried to keep the sketches, you know, kind of straightforward and simple enough. I didn't want to add too much style in the treatment of them, because I just really want people to be able to take what I started with and kind of add to it and make it theirs. You know, as far as that design you talked about with the leaf that's, you know, slowly stretching and forming into ornamentation, that scroll work is based on a canthus leaf, and it goes all the way back to Greek and Roman architectural and decorative design. And I think that a lot of people are just seeing this kind of stuff, this ornamentation, and they're drawing it without really understanding that it is based on a leaf. And once you kind of get that understanding of the leaf and how it rolls and turns and twists, it makes it a lot easier to draw your own ornamentation like that. I know for me, just the process of drawing that stuff over and over and over again has really given me a way better understanding of just creating things in space, you know, out of my mind. I'm getting so much better at just kind of envisioning things going, you know, out into space and then curling back at me and twisting and turning. You know, I'm sure it's something that you guys are familiar with from the styles you do. And in a lot of ways, I'm inspired by, you know, the bioorganic genre with this ornamental stuff, and I'm starting to do more and more pieces that are just straight up ornament, you know, but going into tunnels and, you know, creating drop shadows and coming out at you, and all the things that, you know, are exciting about your tattoos, Guy. You know, adding light sources to them and all that stuff. So that's kind of one of the next, you know, developing styles for me to tattoo.
Nice. Yeah, there's actually a few designs in the Biomech Encyclopedia that we're working on that I started with Victorian ornament and printed it out really extra light, and then just started drawing on top of it and macking it out. And there absolutely are all kinds of parallels. The fundamentals of what makes something flow well, and what creates a sense of depth, those things are universal. They cross all the boundaries of style. Right.
Well, I mean, you know, I got to give you credit. I learned so much of that from your book. So, you know, it's actually quite an honor to be here talking with you guys.
Right on. I appreciate that. And I guess you've got another project in progress right now, right? It's a DVD that you're doing with Gunnar.
Yeah. Well, so Gunnar and I have both been teaching seminars for quite some time now, and earlier this year we decided to do a seminar together at Hell City. So we called the seminar A Match Made in Hell, and we filmed it. Yeah. And we got some good footage of the seminar. And essentially the seminar covers kind of the fundamentals of picture making from a tattooing perspective. We get into a little bit of color theory, ways of creating depth. Gunnar covers line work pretty extensively and line weight. It was a good, like, maybe 2.5 hours of content in that. And so we got it filmed, and we wanted to make a DVD of it. To supplement that DVD, we decided to do a collaborative tattoo. So a couple of weeks ago, Gunnar and I actually went down to Miami and brought our client in and did a tattoo of a birdhouse. And we ended up building a model and putting a light inside of it. Yeah, we did it the guy way, and we built a model and put a light inside of it, put lights on the outside, photographed it, printed out the picture, and used that image to kind of inform our drawing. And so in the end, I think we have a lot more interesting content to share that, before we ever started the tattoo. I love the way the tattoo came out, and, it's got a light source element that couldn't have been nearly as good as it was, I don't think, without the process that we went through. So we got that on film, and together we have a 2-disc, a 2-DVD set coming out. I don't know what we're going to call it. It's still in the editing stages right now. But I'm really excited to get that out and get on to the next thing.
That should be incredible.
That's really cool. I want to see the tattoo now. Is it online, the tattoo you guys did?
No, we haven't posted it yet. I guess we're waiting until the right time to get it out there and promote the project. But I'll send you guys a private shot of it if you want.
Okay, sounds cool.
Are you a fan at all of the artist Maxfield Parrish?
I've heard the name, but I'll have to go check him out.
Well, he was considered an illustrator as opposed to a fine artist, and I personally don't know where that line gets drawn. I think there's people that decide that and just impose it on the rest of us. But
right,
he was. If you saw the paintings, you'd recognize him. He did these like ecstatic girls standing on rocks with wind blowing through their hair.
Did he do illustrations for Thomas Edison?
I think it was for General Electric. He did calendars. And there was a period where there were like 30 million American homes that had his stuff hanging up in their kitchens or whatever. But he was actually one of the first artists that I ever heard of that built models. And he built these elaborate mountainscapes and things like that. And that's part of what gave me the idea to build these models for all this organic modeling and that kind of thing. But he also built little houses and stuff, and hearing this birdhouse thing, made me think about him. He had a lathe that he would use for turning little columns and things like that. Just absolutely meticulous craftsmanship. But all this went into just trying to visualize the final image so that the painting itself could be more realistic and so you could feel its presence more.
I would contribute that it seems like the more relationship you have with your subject, the more intuitive you're going to be with representing it. So if you build a model, or I spend a lot of time in nature looking at flowers and birds and things like that, but I really submerge myself, and I feel like the more you are one with your subject, the more that's going to come through in your art, regardless of what it is. And that's just something for all artists to work on and connect to. Yeah,
I think a lot of tattooers are going to hear us talking about building models for tattoos and just kind of go, man, I can't do that, like there's no time for building models. But we were able to do it in a way that was really not that time consuming. We found the birdhouse at Michael's, and we just hacked it up with a Dremel tool and slapped some paint on it, and put a couple of lights inside of it. All told, I think we probably spent about 45 minutes with the model. It wasn't a huge deal for us, and you don't always have to build a model. It could just be about collecting the subject matter that you commonly tattoo. Skulls and hourglasses and skeleton keys and books and, all those subject matters that find their way into my tattoos. Or, a lot of those things are sitting on the shelf over there. And it makes so much of a difference to be able to pull out the physical object and and turn it in front of you and see it from different angles and put lights on it and see what the light does to it. And you know, it's so much better than just a simple Google search. You know, sometimes that's the only answer, but you know, when possible, I'm going to try to get that real thing in front of me.
It shows in your art. It shows in your drawing style that you have a relationship and an observation for it. Is a lot of those symbols that you put in your art, are those your ideas or your clients' requests, or both?
Well, you know, I think we kind of put out there what we're interested in doing, and we get more of that back. So, you know, that's kind of the way it works for me. You know, for quite a while now, I've been staying away from certain kinds of imagery and really pushing other kinds of imagery. And you know, if I were to kind of describe the imagery that I like to tattoo, I think it's, you know, it's classic. It's usually American, you know, kind of Victorian at times. I really like doing, you know, images that kind of have a strong positive sentiment to them. If I ever go dark or evil, it's just a little bit macabre. I don't do a lot of like really gory or off-putting imagery. So, you know, I don't do any Japanese style anymore. Just try to stick to things that seem authentic for me as a person to be doing. You know, if I can get it to pass the test of authenticity for me as a person and the client, then those are my favorite tattoos. You know, in the future, I really want to do more tattoos based on musical instruments. You know, I'm a amateur banjo player, guitar player, things like that. So I like connecting with people that are into, you know, kind of mountain culture or like even, you know, Southern culture, those kind of things.
That's cool.
You know, just trying to connect with more clients who are just, you know, on the same wavelength as me, and you know, you kind of are going to present me with ideas that I wouldn't have thought of that I'm going to be excited about. I'm not very good with the, you know, do anything you want request. I really like to start with some sort of an idea. You know, I mean, people are pretty safe if they just want to say do ornamental on me. But other than that, I'm kind of lost with do whatever you want requests.
Yeah, well, then you find yourself second guessing what you're doing. It's like, is this really what they want? Because,
yeah,
you know, I get that.
Because they never told you what they wanted.
Right, and I mean, each of us has a bandwidth we work within, but it's still a pretty broad spectrum. And, you know, there are things that I do that are quite different from other things that I do. And so, yeah, a little input is nice. And it's not just for the purpose of knowing what they want, but I also want to get challenged a little bit.
Right.
I like what you said, by the way, of how you broke down your process of really putting yourself in your work. And that's really cool. I think that when you're a seasoned artist, you sort of naturally arrive at that. It seems, you know, like focusing on American and the things that you surround yourselves with that really you relate to. That's really authentic.
Well, and you narrow down what you're interested in, and you find that certain things you want to do more, and other things you just don't care to. And
even if you appreciate a culture and what they do in their art, it's nice that you've invented your own language that works for you. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
People ask, you know, how do you find a style? And, you know, I mean, you found yours, I think the way we all do, you find it organically by what naturally fits what you're doing.
And I think your work is very distinctively you, by the way. When I see your work, I know it's yours. It's the way it's drawn. Your colors are very specific to you as well. I've noticed that your color scheme is really particular to your look.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you know, there's a formula to it. I mean, a lot of times I just kind of pick one color and make it the bright color, and then, you know, subdue or desaturate almost every other color in some way. So that's part of the look that I'm getting. You know,
effective.
Thank you. You know, as far as, you know, tips on finding a style, yeah, I think you have to try to be authentic. You know, do the things that people are responding to more, and avoid the things that people aren't responding to, and you know, kind of try to notice what you're excited about doing, and do more of that. I mean, that's, it's tough because the style that I do is based on subject matter. It's imagery, and I've probably done 20 different octopus tattoos at this point, and it's like, I'm not sure I've got another one of those in me. But, if you take a break from an image for a while and come back to it a year later, a lot of times you can come up with a fresh way to do it again and get excited about it again. So, that's one of the challenges, when people, email us through our website, and it's more emails coming my way than I can really take on. So it's up to me to kind of sort through them and find the ones that are going to actually get tattooed. And, it's definitely a challenge to make sure that I'm getting the right projects on my calendar and doing the things that I'm going to be excited about. And I have to choose it now and then tattoo it 6 months to a year from now, and that's also a problem.
Right, that's a good point. Where are you going to be when the project actually arrives?
Right.
We've got a couple of very talented special guests who are going to be joining us in a few minutes. One of them is Kelly Doty. She works with you at Ink&Dagger, right?
Right, yeah. Kelly works with me for maybe about the last year now. And Teresa Sharpe is Kelly's best friend and consistent travel companion. And Teresa's awesome as well. They've both been, great to work with and hugely inspirational for me. So, you asked for me to come up with some people to bring on, and I thought they would be perfect. They're currently in France. I was just with them up until the day before yesterday, so I'm even a little jet lagged right now, but I think for them it's going to be like 5 in the morning.
Yeah.
Well, they're young.
They're still up.
Yeah.
Now Teresa's saying that their Wi-Fi connection is pretty French right now, so we'll see how this goes. We're going to try Skyping us in a moment here.
I want to add that I really like your black and gray also. Your just the ornament. I saw the hand that you did is very beautiful.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I don't just really color. I don't get as many requests for black and gray, but I really enjoy just working in value only and doing black and gray portraits as well.
Cool.
Alien. Yep, that's what we're doing.
All right, are you there?
Yes.
Hi. We're psyched to have you both.
Your work is amazing. I love your tattoos. Both of you guys.
Kelly, let's start with you because
Sure.
you just did a seminar recently, and I guess it was your first, right?
Hi! Oh, that was so awesome. I just felt like God. How are you guys today? Excellent. My name is Kelly Doty, and now you know how to pronounce my last name.
Yeah, that was definitely my first time doing a seminar or webinar or anything like that. It was.
And how did it go?
Exciting and terrifying.
Yeah, the first time I did one, I think was a bigger learning experience than the previous year of tattooing combined, because I suddenly found myself having to think about everything that I said. I couldn't just casually say anything because everybody's listening like you actually know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that was probably part of the terror that I felt, but it was like part of the excitement about it was that like there was a whole group of people that wanted to know like the same things that I knew. Something about the fact that it was just like a free sharing of information.
Did you like that aspect of it, or did you feel like you didn't want to tell everyone everything you knew?
I briefly had a thought about that, when I was trying to put it together. I was thinking about, do I just try to pour everything in there? And in the end, I did try to get as much information as I possibly could into it, because I didn't feel like I needed to neglect anything. if it came down to an ego thing of like, oh no, do I want to give away like all my secrets? Like, I'm doing finger quoties there, but you can't see that.
Right.
You know, it wasn't really a big deal in the end, because if someone's going to take something that I say and then do it better than me, that's just as exciting. And if I can't do it better, then, you know, I just need to try harder anyways.
No one's you. So you're unique. You have a unique approach. Every artist does. That's in touch with their art. That can only be defined by their own skills and vision, no matter how much you tell people what you do.
Right. I think that's the bottom line. Is and I found this because, you know, of course, people have even when people try to copy my stuff verbatim,
it never looks like
totally different. You know.
Yeah.
And you know, of course, when people aren't copying, but they're just listening to you and they're trying to apply your advice towards their own thing, it's going to be even more different from your work. And nobody's going to do your work anyway. And this is something I think that at this point I've lost all fear of sharing, because nobody is going to do your work. Nobody's got your hand. You know what I mean?
Exactly. There's like, that was actually part of the seminar I was talking about, how everything goes through like a U filter. Like, if you were to, you know, take a painting and try to replicate it as closely as possible, you know, there's gonna be something that's different just because it's going through someone else's like life experiences, someone else's hand, you know, motion, someone's muscle memory. There's always gonna be a filter over it.
It's interesting because earlier Russ was talking about the tattoo filters. So
Yeah.
It goes through both the tattoo filter and the U filter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's really cool.
So you're doing some. I mean, we're all three of you are very fine illustrative tattooists. Each of you has a very different approach. The work you're doing is very smooth, highly rendered, kind of painterly. It's, I guess you could say, it's rooted in a little bit of a cartoon look, but the way that you've applied it and approached it is so far beyond that. Where did this all come from? What are some of your influences, and what are you trying to do specifically with all this?
If I had to cite influences, it probably wouldn't just be necessarily like art or tattooing. There's really obvious influences, like Jesse Smith is a big influence tattoo wise, and I feel very influenced by Nick Baxter as well, like two very different artists. But then, you know, I have influences in the art world, like Greg Simpkins and Camille Rose Garcia, and Mark Ryden is a fairly obvious one. But also there's like, my mom bought me old like 99-cent VHS tapes when I was little of like Max Fleischer cartoons, so like Betty Boop and like the really early like Merry Melodies and stuff like that. It's also a huge influence. You know, you can find influence from anywhere.
Yeah, true.
And is there a place where you're planning on going with it? When you look at your portfolio now, you're seeing a lot of medium-sized, you know, very dialed-in pieces. Are you starting to move towards larger work now?
No. No, God, no. I'm trying to move away from larger work right now. I think a big part of tattooing and art in general is knowing not so much your limitations, like that's great too, I guess, but knowing what makes you happy, you know. And I don't have a very long attention span, and it makes me a lot happier to do like a one shot or maybe like a 2-sitting tattoo. So working on medium-sized things where I can have one thing be the focal point, and then maybe having a couple supporting characters, not really an extensive background, not really taking up a lot of space. That's probably where I'm happiest and where I'm comfortable to be right now. But as far as future endeavors, I don't plan it out. It would be interesting to see if later on, you know, I'm into doing like back pieces and sleeves over, one-shot tattoos. But right now, one-shot tattoo is where I'm happiest.
I'm at the opposite end of that spectrum.
I was wondering what your thoughts were.
So yeah, Teresa, you're starting to do pretty large stuff, and obviously you've had a lot of attention recently because of the Best Ink victory, which was well deserved.
Well deserved, yeah.
I remember asking my sister about halfway through the season. So and any promising contenders, and she's like, well, I can't tell you anything, but I think you already know.
Well, I had seen your work. We didn't really watch that show, but as soon as I saw your work and I knew you were on that show, I just knew you were going to win because it was so strong. I mean, it was like I was really impressed as soon as I saw your tattoos. They're really strong drawings, and they're nice to look at. And there's a lot going on. It's pleasing to the eye, like with subtlety and strong contrast singing together.
So, if my memory serves me correctly, didn't you show me your book about 5 or 6 years ago at one of Gabe's events? Was that you?
Yeah. I was actually at Paradise. You were doing, I think, critiques for just anybody that wanted to come up and ask about certain aspects of tattooing, especially if they had read through your book. And I definitely made that into an opportunity for myself. I really felt like that. I mean, anytime I could get a critique from anybody, I was willing to take it. And I think at that same convention, I had also approached Russ Abbott about critiquing my work, and so I'd been critiqued by him, and then I was critiqued by you, and then I think I missed my flight home, but totally worth it, it was just something I went through fine arts training when I went to college. I did a 4-year thing at college, got my degree in fine arts before I got into tattooing at all, and throughout my college career, critiquing is a huge part of, just everyday class. So, knowing how important that was to get me through college and to feel like I grew as an artist in college, I knew that if I could find that in the tattoo world, that I absolutely needed to have it.
How do you think that, I think a lot of people are afraid to get critiqued, and of course, if you post on the wrong kind of forums, you're just going to, get brutalized. But
right.
How do you think that we could encourage more of that sort of thing? Obviously we're getting some pretty enthusiastic, people putting work up for critique on this show, but of course it's all great work that we're critiquing here, and it's kind of like, as Nika was saying last week, we're splitting hairs. We're looking at great tattoos and just sort of picking apart how to make them even more great. But, people who are still, up and coming, I think a lot of them are I think afraid of having, the rug yanked out from under them. How do you think we could encourage more sort of an open dialogue like that?
Absolutely. A lot of people are afraid to ask for that. They're afraid of what they're going to get back from certain artists, I think for artists that are already kind of, getting where they want to be with their artwork, I think keeping an open door to people is important. Like, I've had a few different people email me asking about, critiques, wanting to have their work critiqued. I've had some people approach me at conventions with their portfolios, just kind of wanting some feedback. And I try not to turn that stuff down. I really try to give them the time of day because they actually took the time to ask me for that. And I know how important it was for me when I was approaching artists that I looked up to, for them to say yes and, actually sit down with me and go over the work. For a new artist that's, not sure how to go about getting that, obviously the best way to do it is to approach some of your favorite artists that you're trying to get tattooed by even, and if you can get in with an appointment with them, make it kind of part of the appointment. I definitely did that to Jeff Ensminger a lot, going down and getting my back work done. And that was one of my first tattoos, and every time I would go down, I would usually ask him to look through some of my work, or even just some of my sketches to try and help me figure out what I needed to do to take my work to the next step. And it was super helpful for me. So I think, that's one way, if you decided that you want to approach somebody for a critique, you really just kind of have to go and do it. But I think something that we as artists that are more established now, that are looking to help the younger generation, that want to partake in helping other people get to where they want to be. Setting up critiques. I do critique night at my shop at least once a month. I started instigating that back when Nick Baxter and I started doing a critique group at the Paradise Conventions at the Artist Gathering. So once we started doing that, and we actually kind of came up with an outline and put together, how to critique your work, how to go through critiques with each other. And we actually did that at a couple Paradise Gatherings. Once we started doing that at those, I started doing it in my shop. I was like, if I'm going to do this at these artist gatherings, I might as well take it home and make all the dudes at my shop do it too, So it was really beneficial, and I absolutely love it. And it's something that we've done for more than a year now. So I think that's also one way to go about it.
Yeah, I don't think that there's enough of that going on right now, but I think with the right encouragement, it could become more of a, I guess, it's a thing you could do while you're sitting around with your friends having a drink. It's not like work, It
can be somewhat informal.
But you have to be willing to let people look at your work in that light.
Absolutely, and that's something at our shop. We don't make everybody come. It's definitely open ended to whoever wants to be there can be there, and if you can't make it, that's okay too. But it's highly encouraged at the shop. And whenever we have guest artists come through, we also try to work out a night around their stay so that they can partake in it, and we can kind of share that experience with them, and then hopefully they can either take that to the next shop that they go to, or take it home with them and maybe start using it at their own shop.
Have you noticed a strong improvement in the people that you've been critiquing, that they seem to evolve more quickly because you kind of guide them with things that you're pointing out or openly talking about together?
Absolutely. I mean, there's always, you kind of have two different kinds of people that approach critiques. There are some that throughout the critique, they kind of fight what you're saying, and they maybe deny it or have reasons or excuses of their own for why they did things, but then you'll see the improvement happen over the course of the next week or two, where they just start subconsciously implementing the things that you talk about. And then there's other people that they want so badly to have somebody talk about that stuff with them and go over those flaws, that they immediately, they take to it and they try to make those changes as quickly as possible, or they just approach you more throughout the workday, when they're putting together a tattoo, and they're like, so you talked about this. Is this what you were talking about? Is this what you want to see changed? And sometimes those changes happen immediately. It's also super beneficial to myself, critiquing people that aren't there yet. Even if they're not tattooing at the level that I'm tattooing at, they still have insight into my tattoos, things that I'm not seeing that they're seeing happening in the tattoo work, and that has vastly helped me improve too.
Yeah. Being on the teaching end of things is incredibly beneficial, but I think that being on the receiving end, where if you're a person who is opening yourself up to critique in the first place, I think you're already in a mindset where you're ready to grow and you're hungry for that, and right there is the foundation for learning. If you're not willing to sit down for a critique, you're probably not ready to change what you're doing anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are people definitely that come to critique that have a hard time accepting what's talked about. But I think just the first step of coming, even if you don't show your work, watching and listening to other people talk about their work is helpful too.
Well, hey, I'd like to jump in here. We have a lot of questions in from the chat room.
Okay, well, let's take a few of those before we actually move into these critiques.
Sounds good. These are questions that are applicable for everybody kind of on the panel. How do you help a client with a bad idea work towards a good tattooable idea?
Yeah, you might.
Russ, field this one?
Yeah, the first step is to figure out what is bad about their idea. And try to explain that to them, and then try to free associate from the starting point of their idea to several other concepts that are kind of in the same family. That a lot of times I've found that just being excited about the concept I'm presenting and letting that come through in my tone of voice and in my body language can do a lot to just kind of get people to go the way I want them to go. So, you know, if they come in with an idea that is actually bad, and I can explain to them why it's bad and then give them 2 or 3 other options, then that's one thing. If they come into it with an idea that is not actually bad but just doesn't agree with me, then I have to have a different approach. You know, if I just don't want to do it, then I've got to figure out how to get them to understand that it's not me being mean and that it's not their bad idea. They just need to find the right artist to do it. You know, so having a diverse crew at my tattoo shop helps me do that. You know, I can just say to people, you know, I'm not the right person. I don't have the skill set that's needed to make this tattoo the best it can be, but this guy over here can do it. And you need to talk to them. So, you know, to me, that's an important distinction to make. You know, if their idea is bad because it won't work as a tattoo versus if it's bad just because I don't feel like doing it.
A lot of bad ideas are just when somebody has too many ideas, they want to cram into one tattoo. And usually I'll just say, well, okay, let's put all that aside and tell me what it is you're hoping to get out of this tattoo. And they might not necessarily be able to answer that question because it's sort of vague. But at the same time, it does get them thinking a little bit differently. And usually from there, we can proceed towards coming up with something that will work.
And I always say to people a lot of times, what is it you're really trying to say? Like what Guy just said. I once had this girl that asked me for a back piece that wanted all these like different symbols and stars that meant this and zodiac signs and Celtic and a dragon turning into Celtic. It was just this insane, like way too many things idea. And I told her she had to distill it down to what she was really trying to say in the essentials, and she couldn't do that. She said she was too attached to her imagery. So I said, well, I can't do the piece then. And a couple of years later, I got a thank you letter from her thanking me for not doing the piece because she had realized that was probably a bad idea. So honesty, right?
Yeah. Right, totally.
Like it won't.
That's such a typical approach for people who are new to getting tattooed to make, you know, to just try to think of everything that ever meant anything to them and cram it into the image. And, you know, any of us with experience doing tattoos or looking at them know that normally doesn't turn out into a nice image. You know, and the client may get everything they wanted crammed into it, but when they go out and they show it to people in their daily life and they don't get a positive response, they're going to start to hate the tattoo.
I think too, if you're unfamiliar with getting tattooed, you know, you kind of have this is the last one, this is the ultimate tattoo of all time mentality. Yeah. And, you know, it just helps to remind someone, you know, pick a couple aspects, and then the other things you can get in a different tattoo. Like, I guarantee you'll have room left. You could do that. And people just, they never think of it that way until, you know, someone just kind of states it for them. And it's just an aspect that usually kind of gets neglected until that point. And they in my experience, they've always been happy to hear that. Like, oh yeah, I can get other tattoos.
Don't you love it when they say, "Oh, you get this one tattoo"?
I said that.
By the end of the session, they're already telling you the plans for the next one.
It's just sometimes you don't know where to start. Collector, you don't know where to start, and you want to make everything count, and sometimes you overthink things. I think that happens a lot when you're just starting to collect tattoos.
Yeah, we have to educate the public every day. Okay, we're ready for the next one.
Oh yeah, we've got plenty here. So everybody here does a lot of things. How do you stay creative under all of the stress?
Who's the most stressed here?
Tell us what's up. You know.
Okay, let's talk to the global travelers right now.
Yeah, the jet setters. All you guys are jet setters.
You guys are in France right now, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. We are very much in France.
And you're both, obviously beyond tattooing, you're both doing work in other mediums. You know, Kelly just did a seminar. Teresa, you've been doing a number of TV appearances and things like that. So I guess there's an example of doing a lot of things. Are you stressed?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely, all the time.
Stress it's actually something that comes up a lot on tour. Like when we're traveling around the country, like and we do a tour, or when we're this is our first international like mini tour.
Oh yeah.
It's something that we forget about because we're so busy and there's so much that has to get done. You don't have time to acknowledge the fact that it's really, really stressful until someone else brings it up to you.
Sorry, blame Guy.
We've talked about it a lot this year because of just the sheer amount of traveling that we've done and how much time we've spent away from our shops and our families, respectively.
Yeah.
And it is extremely stressful to try and be on the road to remember everything that you're going to need, not just to travel, like your clothes and your shampoo and money and food and things like that, but just to remember all of your tattoo equipment, the people that you're going to be meeting up with and tattooing, what they want to get tattooed on them, making sure you have access to the internet wherever you are so that you can look up references and do the research for all of your tattoos. We each spend at least an hour to 2 hours just researching ideas for our tattoos before we even get to the drawing stages. And when you're traveling, a lot of times you're doing that drawing the night before, maybe the day before, maybe the morning of.
Yeah.
Maybe when they get there.
There's a lot of like flying by the seat of your pants that you kind of have to get comfortable with. Like, you have to get comfortable with things going wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, every time something goes wrong, it eats away at your soul just a little bit more. And you don't realize it until, like, one day, you wake up with a rash all over your body. Or one day you wake up and you're horribly sick and you have like no idea why, and you realize that you're just a little bit overtired. It's easy to ignore stress until it makes itself completely and absolutely known. So we do that sometimes.
We do that, but
we find that's a good way to deal with it.
Well, and I think that the thing that we've really figured out this year is actually like discovering your limit of stress that you can handle, because it's different for everybody. We've traveled with different friends and other artists and have realized quickly that the amount of stress that Kelly and I can handle and still tattoo and be creative is a lot more than other artists. There are some people that they have to have their routine, they have to have things happen the way they're supposed to, and if that's how you are and you recognize that, then you just have to be more prepared and you have to be ready for that. And maybe don't travel the country as much, or maybe don't do a tour followed up with a trip overseas, But it's different for everybody.
So basically, you have to know your limits, you guys. All of us, we have to know our limits to a certain extent. We find them out as a result of pushing ourselves sometimes too much, and then that kind of sets the pace.
You can't know what too much is until you've gotten there.
The thing is you'll never know until you try, though. So you do have to, as an artist, make that decision to really give it your all and go for it and just see what's going to happen. That was our first tour, was just like, we really had no idea how it was going to go. We didn't even know each other that well, and we just signed up to do it and did it. And it was the best decision we ever made, because we grew so much as artists on that first tour, and every tour since then has been, has made us into the artists that we are today. But we would not have known that if we hadn't gone for it and just given it a shot. So as an artist, like, if you feel stagnant, if you feel like you're not growing as quickly as you want to, then jump out there and do something about it. Like, don't just sit around and wait for artists to come to you to change your life. Like, go out there and make that happen. And when you do hit that point where you can't possibly be more creative because you're running on 2 hours of sleep a night, then you know that there's a limit for you.
Right. That's solid. Good advice.
So, Russ, you're on a different kind of production schedule. Obviously, you're doing a lot of tattooing. And this is something I think I can relate to, because I'm like at the computer a lot, editing and doing layouts and things like that. How do you handle all of that? I'm sure you've probably hit some moments of very little sleep this last few months.
Yeah, one thing that works really well for me, if you can see it over my shoulder here, this dry erase board. I have so many ideas floating through my head at all times, and different things that I could possibly be putting time into. From planning future seminars to working on advertisement and promotion for my shop. We're actually going to be doing a expansion at the shop soon and doubling the amount of space. So I'm thinking about that stuff. I've got tattoo appointments to worry about, art commissions, all kinds of stuff. So for me, just writing it up there on the board and then, kind of crossing it out when I complete it is such a important tiny thing that I do to stay focused. If I've got a certain, convention that I'm doing, I'll write the name of the city up and I'll circle it and I'll draw lines out of that circle and, write hotel, airline ticket, promotion, how am I going to ship my merchandise there to sell? And I'll kind of just like put all those things on the board. And then, on my days off or when I have time, I go back to the board and see what I have to work on and sort of prioritize. And, it also helps to just kind of like put tattooing on certain days. I only work 4 days a week at the tattoo shop. So, I go in and I put in my time for that, but I still have 3 days off for other stuff and for, seeing my 3 kids and my wife and relaxing, playing music or, working on artwork and all those things. So, I guess, I know that a lot of tattooers are pushing 6 or 7 days a week of tattooing, and I just know I can't handle that. And I know that, so many other things in my life will suffer. So I'm just making sure that I save time for me and save time for the other things I want to work on. And I get a lot out of teaching and, developing content for the seminars or the DVDs and all that stuff. I mean, I personally feel like I've grown so much as an artist and as a person from, kind of collecting all the things that I know and figuring out a way to put them in other people's heads.
Okay, one more question.
We're already
everyone here has a very distinct style. Do you have any tips on how to guide clients towards getting your particular style?
Put your work out so that they can see it and the right people will come to you. It should be that simple, but it takes a long time to get there.
Right. Yeah, it's about putting the stuff in your portfolio that you want to do more of. If there's a piece that you did that you'd like to kind of repeat that idea, then maybe make some drawings that are similar and show them to people, and just generally like let your excitement about certain subject matter come through and get the people that are excited about that stuff to know about you.
Yeah, I agree. It's always helpful to like let your enthusiasm for certain things to show through and let yourself be honest with a client. If they bring you something that you're not excited about, you might not be the best person for that tattoo, and I think it's totally acceptable to be honest about that. So
yeah, it's all about communication. And, like Russ was saying, just because a tattoo you did was good, if it's not something you want to be doing more of, you don't necessarily want to show it to everyone. Because people are going to ask you for more of what they see you've already done. And, it's funny, it's not even just with subject matter. Like, if they've seen you do sleeves, they'll ask you for sleeves, but they won't ask you for a back piece until they've seen you do a back piece. People are really kind of funny that way.
Yeah, that's totally true. I've had the hardest time breaking out of the mold of just doing sleeves and getting into doing back pieces or other spots on the body. So, you have to like make a strategic effort to control, the flow of what happens in your career in so many ways.
Yeah, it is something you have to apply pressure in the direction you want it to move, because otherwise, if you just take in everything that walks in the door and give it all equal priority, you'll just be this jack of all trades, master of none. And if you are really trying to refine a particular style, apply pressure in that direction, and it'll happen. Just be patient. And
I would say stay true to whatever it is you believe in, your principles, whatever that is. defines you as a unique individual, I think you should follow that and develop it further, because there's always room for improvement no matter what your style is.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's critique time. We probably have a dozen more questions, but it's already after midnight, or after 1 there, and after what, 6 in France. Sun's coming up.
Good morning.
You're a vampire. Yeah.
So
nice.
yeah, we're critiquing illustrative style tattoos today. Who's first?
We're starting with number 1. This is Sean Hebranks. It's the ferret. Kelly, you have a funny story about Sean?
I have plenty of funny stories about Sean. He actually worked at the studio that I started my apprenticeship in, and so when I was like first starting, he was there. So since then, I mean, we've become really good friends, and I tattooed him, and he's gonna be tattooing me to remember our time at like a street shop in Meriden, Connecticut, and we were actually next to this really, really foul hotel. Like, the shop is located next to the Flamingo Inn, which holds all of the wonder and exoticness that you would expect from a truck stop hotel in Connecticut. So he has a really sexy pink flamingo on his knee now to commemorate our time next to that lap of luxury.
Some moments just deserve commemoration. This is a cute tattoo.
It's cute.
It's got the beginnings of some nice dimension. It could definitely have a lot more modeling. Like, you can see, especially like the nose, there's like a sense of there being 2 different light sources helping define its volume, but that's really only hinted at through the rest of it. It would been nice to see a little bit more of that. I think the piece is a little light and a little flat. I don't know if it needed more of a dark background to pop it, a stronger outline, or just a higher contrast modeling in the ferret itself.
Yeah, I personally would agree with the comment, especially about the background. A lot of it sits in mid-tones to light tones, and it makes it a little bit difficult to get a sense of depth of field. But it is nice to see like how delicately rendered a lot of it is, and that does give you a sense of depth elsewhere, like, you know, in the fur and towards the umbrella and everything.
I think my biggest issue with it is just when you back off from a distance, especially the hindquarters area is like as light as the untattooed skin around it, and I just think that it wouldn't have taken much of a background to really make that pop out a lot more. I mean, this is a piece that's got almost all the ingredients to actually have a lot of dimension. It falls short just by that one tiny amount, but that's enough to make a huge difference.
Next piece.
Yeah. Anyone else have anything to say? We'll move on.
Well, the next one is one of Guy's tattoos.
I could tell the guy did this. You know, it had some elements like the color outline around the rope, and you know, something about the face looked like other faces that I'd seen Guy do before. You know, for me, what's missing in this is a bold color. I feel like maybe the background would have been nice as a really strong color to balance out all the kind of earth tones that are going on in there. You know, and that's something that maybe it's just I'm just tuned into that being an element of style that I really like, is to have, you know, one strong color kind of work its way into a piece, and especially in a case of, you know, this where it's skin tone predominantly taking up all the space, and then we have an almost skin tone rope, and the rope I'm sure needed to be rope colored, So in my mind, I would just search for some way to get some other color in there. That's the only thing
okay, what would you suggest?
Red?
What's that?
Well, what color would you suggest? Like in seeing the other very subtle colors that are already throughout this piece. If you're going to bring in one strong color, because I'd say, Russ, I have trouble with this, and I know I shouldn't be saying this publicly. I'm partly colorblind.
Okay.
And I mean, I live in a full colored world, but I don't see color the way that everybody else does. And I struggle with this. And
right.
So, yeah.
But also, just one little thing to add is she asked for a black and gray sleeve, this woman, and guy had to sneak a little color, and you had to negotiate with her.
It's true. I mean,
so he wasn't free to do anything he really wanted.
Right, but all that aside, let's just say that wasn't present, because I struggled with this in a lot of my work. I put a ton of color in, and I back off from it, and I wonder why is it not more impacting?
Right,
and I'm sure everybody.
I don't think it matters what color you choose. It's just about choosing one and putting it in there saturated and bright. All I can see in there is a little bit of green kind of organic stuff up there. What exactly happened in the upper arm? Or is
that's leftover of a 3/4 sleeve that ends there, and I was just kind of merging with it. That's some Japanese style stuff up there.
Gotcha.
Maybe
the stuff wrapped around her chest, is that a possible place that it could have been in color, maybe?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, again, this is her request. She was asking for it to look like tattered old gauze, but
right.
Again, this is not on her, but I could just use any color scheme I wanted. Yeah, that would be an opportunity.
Yeah, I think it's really a safe thing to just pick one color. That way, if you are looking for a safe option where you're not going to run into a conflict by putting too many colors that clash, you can just subdue almost everything except for one color. For me, a lot of times it's a warm red. That's one that I repeat a lot. If I don't go red, then I might try to go like, a more saturated green or teal or something like that. But yeah, I think it's easy enough to just think of it in terms of one simple bright color in a case like this where you've got this neutral palette. And just by putting that one strong color in, you can kind of give it that sense of being bright all of a sudden.
Right, and then, of course, then you also have all the neutrals, which in some ways will appear more neutral in comparison.
Yeah, sure.
Kelly and Teresa, did you get the image?
Yeah. I think a solution too, if you have a client that's perhaps like hesitant about color and they want to keep it minimal, I think it's okay to be comfortable with that, because that's why black and gray tattoos work, is because of value over color. As long as your values are strong, like, it won't really matter exactly what color is in there. That comes down to almost an aesthetic choice. So if I was going to look at this tattoo critically, I might consider having put in, a lighting effect that would make the rope darker in value, or make the gauze darker in value, and that way color wouldn't be so much of a concern.
One of the things that I do a lot is actually will put black outlines in the tattoo, but then try to figure out ways to make those outlines disappear back into the shading in the way I treat the edges. Right. So where I kind of have it as a rule that I'm not going to have an edge that's defined only by line. If there's a light value on either side of a line, then I look for a way to correct it, either by, just changing the background, or modeling dark towards the edge, or, putting a design element through that little spot that is going to give me more contrast.
Yeah, I've heard Kelly say the same thing when she's tattooing about not letting a black line.
Yeah, don't you let your line do the work for you. if you have a strong value on either side, you don't have to rely on that line.
Right, or if it's a line alone and it's light on both sides, that's what I would refer to as negative on negative.
Right.
Where you have...
well, you also call it the manifestation of indecision.
Yeah, there's that too. You couldn't decide which one to go dark with, and so just did it with neither.
Next. Okay, we're going to put on the next one.
I guess that would be the Molotov cocktail.
This one
it reminds me of Robert Williams, the stylization. Especially the, I don't know what you call it, the frothy stuff around it.
Well, yeah, because there's different stylistic approaches combined in one tattoo.
There's this kind of yellowish, reddish, fiery part at the top. This kind of competing for my attention with this blue part at the bottom. I think that's where the problem kind of comes in. It's just like two different kinds of stuff that's shaped the exact same. There's not enough differentiation between what is the blue stuff and what is the orange and yellow stuff. I really didn't know when I looked at this that it was a Molotov cocktail. I think this is one of those times where it's kind of style and just making it look artistic kind of got so far away from the subject matter that you kind of lose that instant readability that a tattoo kind of needs to have. And that's an important lesson for a tattooer to learn, to try to speak a language that everyone can understand with your work, so that when people look at it, they kind of instantly recognize what it is. So if you're doing a Molotov cocktail, if that's what this is supposed to be, then draw the Molotov cocktail like it is, and then add a little bit of style to it. It's almost been reverse engineered, far beyond even being a Molotov cocktail anymore. So
it's actually it looks like a uranium bullet.
Okay.
Oh.
What it's supposed to be. Well, I agree totally with what Russ said, is that, it's so distilled from whatever its original intention is that you kind of get lost looking at it, and it's confusing.
It's abstractified beyond.
It's sort of confusing, and everything has the same kind of value and rendering to it. Like, it's not, there's no, like, priority shapes and secondary shapes. It's all on the same level. It's sort of confusing, right?
Yeah, it's hard to find where the focus should be. I feel like the less is more approach would have really helped it. I mean, I really like actually the stylization towards the bottom, the like those bubble kind of shapes with the negative space. I feel like that almost would have been enough like stylization if everything else was a little more carefully rendered. And that was most of the extreme stylization.
So if a client came to you looking for a uranium depleted bullet, is there any way to make it more recognizable? It's such a specific thing.
Starting with reference, like what Russ was saying, starting with a reference and then distilling it rather than an abstraction and then trying to make it.
Yeah, make sure that the thing that you're putting through your tattoo filter and your U filter is something that's recognizable to begin with.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, when it's something so obscure, try to make it as recognizable to the viewer as possible, and then, start picking away at it from there.
Right, yeah, that obscurity is setting you up with a challenge to begin with. Well, should we move to the fish?
This is, to me, is suffering from a little bit of an overuse of that gray-green color. Used in the water and the fish is not letting me kind of separate the fish from the water as easily as I'd like to. So, maybe a different color in the water might have been a good idea. With a grayish green, anytime you gray something out, it doesn't really count in my book as a color, so you can freely use a different color without creating a conflict. So, they could have maybe gone with something a little bit more like turquoise-ish or even blue. And the other thing is that empty skin outline around the whole fish is a nice tool to separate things when you need it. But it kind of creates a little bit of awkwardness when it's so bold, and when it meets the part where the fish breaks the water and just sort of ends awkwardly there. It's just maybe a little bit less delicate than I would like it to be. You can kind of blend those out and kind of use it when you need it and don't use it other times, and make it a little bit more of a slick effect without having to stick to such a rigid use of the empty halo.
Well, the other thing is that by using that halo, they have allowed themselves to pretty much use the exact same value inside and outside the fish, with only that halo to separate them.
Yeah, it's fine to leave it while you're still trying to decide, and maybe close it off a little bit later in the tattoo once you realize that you don't have a conflict. That's the approach that I would take.
Well, okay, the way that fin off to the left is silhouetted, and it's pretty much the only part of the whole tattoo that is. If the entire left side of the fish had been silhouetted like that, and then the water fades out into that halo, but I agree, have it fade into it, have it not look like it's been exactoed out of there, then you would have had, a nice pause-on-neg relationship with the left side of the fish. Then the right side, since the whole, right edge of that fish is in lighter colors, could have brought that deep tone right up against it, and it would have popped.
Right. This is something a lot of artists struggle with, is where to put the darks, and this is what you just described is a perfect example of where they could have worked them in. It seems to be missing maybe 30 or 40% of the dark side of the value scale. Selectively placed in those parts. You said, that silhouetted fin, that area of the fish body behind the dorsal fin could have pretty much been solid black, and then the water could go pretty heavy black against the light side of the fish and really push that edge. And this is something that I always work out in the value study part of the tattoo before I ever start tattooing. I get this stuff figured out on paper, and it helps so much to do that ahead of time.
Having a good value study ahead of time is very key in this type of situation, but also, like, at the end of a tattoo, when you're not sure if you've hit the mark or not, taking something like this and throwing it onto Photoshop or on your phone, just taking it and putting it in black and white, will really kind of tell you what's happening with your values. That's the fastest way to understand whether or not your values are where they need to be, is just by taking an image that's done in color and throwing it in black and gray. And a lot of people don't even think that's an option.
We talked about that on our last episode. We call it the Watson test, because Watson
Atkinson, yeah.
Yeah, he once told us that a successful tattoo can be judged on how it reduces to black and gray.
And I had a drunken argument with him about it. I was like, no, if the colors are high contrast enough. But I totally agree with him.
But he's right, and you can. In my earlier work, people were like, "I think you need to focus on value more." And when I started thinking that way, it seemed to make a huge difference in how this stuff was reading.
In the chat room last week, there was somebody that was like, "Hey, did everybody just go into Photoshop and turn all of their tattoo pictures into black and gray?"
It's true though.
So let's.
It's valuable.
I think moving on to the next one.
Okay.
This is Kelly's.
Kelly, whom we're talking to right now?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Well, I mean, I love this tattoo. I think it's a perfect example of what I was talking about with, picking one color and making it strong and then desaturating everything else. In this case, Kelly chose to use red twice. She used it in the bird, the lips, and in the hood. But the only other color that kind of feels like a color is in the eyes, and it's really desaturated and lightened and grayed out as well. So. It's a complementary color scheme, really. Not a lot going on with the palette, but it totally works. It's just a simple, straightforward red and green complementary color scheme, with every other color being so grayed out that it doesn't even affect the color scheme. If someone wanted to, try to take away from looking at Kelly's work what she's really doing that makes it so powerful, I think that's one of the things that she's doing, other than being able to render things in the way that only she seems to be able to do. I've been trying to figure out how to do it for a whole year.
It's very smooth. It's very smooth.
So is this face, and I can't tell from the photo, is it a translucent finish or is this an opaque finish? Is there blank skin left in here, or are these all very subtle gradients?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of blank skin left. She's I've worked with this client a lot, and she's got such pale white skin. It never occurred to me that it would even be necessary to try and pack white into it. So I just let her most of her like skin show through, like especially that highlight on the forehead and on the front of the nose and the tops of the cheekbones. I just let her skin come through.
When I critique people's work, I'll do it with their work. I'll pick it up and hold it at a distance for them to look at and say, "Do you see the problem here?" And this is a really strong, alternation of dark and light, which is what makes a piece read so clearly. The bird gets a little bit lost at the bottom. The right side of the bird is shaded dark, and you've got that little bit of dark background behind it. A little bit of what I would call pause on pause, but that's nitpicking.
Yeah, there's definitely like a hindsight is 20/20 kind of thing. Certain things that I wish I had tweaked like a little bit more, and I'm fortunate. Again, I've worked on her before, and I'll work on her again. That the hair behind her shoulder, closer to her neck, it's very dark. I wish I had continued that darkness all the way to like the tips of her hair, just to make her shoulder stand out a little bit more, and then that way I think the bird would have popped out against that bright white shoulder a little bit more, but they sit kind of in midtones at the moment.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to be decisive.
You have this arrow going through the bird that kind of gets lost where it meets the beak, and I don't know if you had brought that black out further, if that would have helped that or made it even worse. I'm sure that was the kind of the point where you had to decide what to do with that value.
Yeah, or even positioning on the arrow, like maybe it goes the opposite way, with the front end coming out of the breast instead of out of its back. Then there could have been a little more detail on the actual arrowhead itself that could have maybe come more foreground, which I know you love forced perspective. And that would have been one way to push that forced perspective a little more. But yeah, I agree with Russ. I think the arrow going through the bird is almost... It's the most lost thing in this tattoo to me is that arrow.
Honestly, I didn't know it was there.
I didn't notice it till you guys.
Neither of us did until Russ mentioned it.
And I wanted to add, I like the soft wash behind the bird rather than deeper black, because I think it's nice to have some atmosphere in the piece.
I think the bird just needs a little space around it, and the arrowhead needs a little space around it. Just a little halo of skin.
Not sure why this is the time that I was like, oh, let's not do that halo. But I agree that would have been a keen opportunity for it.
Okay. Well,
you knew we were going to...
Well, still, all things considered, it's a great tattoo. I'm sure the girl who has it loves it.
Yeah. Hey, Kelly, one more thing. I really, really love the way the top of her head just fades off into nothing. I know this is on the inner arm near the armpit, and just the way that you decided not to put a black outline around the back side of the hood, I think was a really cool choice.
I like it too. It's really cool.
Well, should we move on to Teresa's?
Not hating her and not wanting to pound color into her armpit. I think she would have punched my face, and I can't handle that.
All right, so I guess we're going to the rat pope.
The hyena
Teresa,
pope?
you know the piece? Oh, it's a hyena? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's gnarly. Beautifully done. I like your limited color palette.
There's something all three of you guys have in common. Besides illustrative style, it's a limited color palette with a lot of grays and subtle colors.
Doing the thing of looking at it from a distance, I think the face gets a little lost. Like with the arrowhead, it probably could have used a little space around it. And just the position of the body is so dramatic that the head is in an odd placement. You know what I mean? There's this really crazy big bulging neck, and then the head's in sort of an odd placement relative to the body.
I really like the placement of the head. I like that like hunched back, like that it's really overly dramatic, and I think it adds to like the creepiness of the hyena. Like that's one of my favorite aspects. But if I had to choose something, like I would definitely say the values in the robe being the same as the smoke are probably that's where my eye gets lost the most. The smoke from like the incense container at the bottom. If the robe had faded into like a darker tone, or even faded straight to black, and then the smoke was in front of that, I feel like it would have popped towards the viewer a little bit more and carried the eye.
Yeah, you don't really have any large areas of dark, except for like one of the places that pops the most is the neck, because you've got this big bright light area really close to what looks like the largest dark area in the whole piece, and that's why the neck stands out. I think that, you know, when I look at that neck and the head, I get what you're saying about the posture and the exaggeration of it, but there's something just a little I think disconnected about the body, the neck, and the head. They don't, without having to stop and look and interpret, you know, they don't read as a single figure very smoothly. And maybe it's because the head and neck connection is interrupted by that hat. But I think that could be resolved just by, you know, very slight tweaks in the way that it was drawn, rather than having to give up that exaggerated posture.
Yeah, I think for me, I had the same issue with the head popping out from the sleeve, and I kind of think it's just because Teresa chose to use white in that that decoration on the sleeve, and it's just kind of like competing for foreground with the bottom jaw. That might have been a good chance for a different color, or maybe a drop shadow from the head down onto the sleeve, or something like that to separate it.
Yeah, I think I definitely think a drop shadow would have helped more. I think if I would have thought about that, definitely around the head, like going just a little darker under the neck and the jawline, would have kind of pushed some of that cloth back further, so that the neck and the head look like they're popping forward a little more. And I agree that, like, in the robe, there could definitely have been more use of black to really separate it from the smoky background, like Kelly was talking about. I really feel like those two suggestions are definitely things that this tattoo could benefit from, and at this point could still benefit from. Like, I could still sit down with him again and go back and do that stuff, and actually, I think, solve some of the issues that this tattoo has.
Yeah. I think that you're right about that. Just getting like bigger gradients going into some deeper tones in a couple of key places would make a huge difference.
Yeah, that's definitely, I mean, that's something I struggle with on tattoos like this one, particularly, you know, where there's a lot of small detail work. You know, there's a lot of objects and things happening in this tattoo, even though it's a very big tattoo. I mean, it's his entire thigh.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a giant tattoo. But
you don't have a sense of scale when you look at it. You don't, I mean, it's hard to know without.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can't really tell in this photo, but yeah, it's really from like almost his hip down to his knee, and that's an issue that I have, and I think something that would help with that is if I started in with larger mags, starting with either like a 15 or even a 17 in some cases on stuff that's this large, and just like blocking in large areas of darker gradients, and really defining shapes instead of, getting in there and working on these little details right away, which is hard to do, I think, as an artist, to kind of you want to get into those little details right away, and it's hard to remind yourself to be like, okay, let's just go through and block in some shadows, like some dark areas and some gray areas and things like that. So That's one thing I've been trying since doing this tattoo. I've been trying to do.
You know, I remember a conversation with Philip. He was talking, Philip Blue. He was talking about how he likes to pull gradients over detail, like after he's finished rendering stuff, and then just come in with a big mag and blast these big gradients over everything. And so I started doing that after that, and it is kind of a neat way of creating big areas of shadow while still having all of your detail and everything there. I'll tell you what, when Michele and I started using big mags, because, you know, we were kind of late in the game doing that, it changed everything.
We have one last one with it, which is Jimmy Litwalks.
This is an example of an artist who relies on the outline to kind of carry the image. And it's something that I don't typically do, but having just done this seminar with Gunnar, it's a big part of his approach as well. And, you know, Jimmy and Gunnar are old friends, and, you know, have a similar approach to like the recipe of what they put in their tattoos. So what I think would benefit this tattoo is another 30% of dark values, you know, mostly in the shell. I'm really feeling like that shell is just kind of flat, and it's missing, you know, a light hitting it from one side, creating a core shadow down the middle that would give it a lot more volume. You know, and I would probably put it towards the left side of the shell because I wouldn't want it to run into the dark values that I used on the hat. But if I were to just sit down on this piece right now, that's where I would start. I would put a core shadow down the left side of the shell, you know, from the tip of it all the way to where it meets the back of the crab. And I would probably find some more places to put solid black. Maybe where the turquoise light meets the red, you can go a lot darker in those parts too. Just adding more value and giving it a little bit more, you know, solid black so that it kind of feels stronger.
I think there's also some places where he could have pulled back on the darkness as well.
Yeah,
like
highlights.
Well, for instance, the mustache and the face sort of merge. You know, you've got a lot of dark shading in both, and it really just takes you know, the right light edges in the right places to kind of offset that. And like you were saying about the way the shell and the figure sort of merge together, a lot of that is because of similar values being used in both. Where, like with the shell, you were talking about using a shadow core kind of off towards the left. I think the thing to do with that is then have the right side of the shell actually be a little bit lighter if he's going to remain so rich with the face and the hat. Either that or go dark behind the face and a little bit lighter with the face itself. You know, one thing that I usually tell people is to choose either your foreground or your background to use your really strong blacks in, but not both, because that's where you start running into stuff merging with each other. And, you know, with something like this, you don't necessarily have a singular foreground and background. You know, your relationships are changing. Something is in the foreground of one element and then goes into the background of another element. So it's not necessarily an easy formula. But
or what about some variation of line weight? So the foreground head was a thicker outline, and the body part where there's shell was a thinner outline, so that would drop back more.
Stronger line in the face and hat, and a little bit lighter or thinner line around the shell. Definitely.
Yeah, I would totally agree with both pushing blacks in certain areas, whether you want that in your foreground or your background, and also the difference in line weight to really push like that front claw forward. It's everything is sitting on the same plane, and I think the clearest view of that is that foreground like tattoo claw is the same as the claw that's directly next to it.
You see how there's a little bit of a stronger line around part of the tattoo claw, and that's the one part of it that comes into the foreground. So you can see how much that line weight makes such a dramatic difference in coming into the foreground. So if it had started out maybe even with a line bolder than that around the tattoo claw, and then that line gets progressively thinner as it gets back to where it joins the body, you actually have the line weight itself defining the perspective of that element.
Yeah, I would agree. I do have to say I absolutely love the teal highlight, and it's something that I normally I don't want to use the word hate, but I'm gonna. Like I'm not usually a fan of like a bold like teal highlight. But I feel like this is the way to do it. And then it merges fairly seamlessly throughout into that kind of muted red tone. And it's really carefully rendered, and I just want to note that I really appreciate it when something that I feel like you see a lot like that bold teal highlight on a new school tattoo is really carefully rendered. It's really effective here.
Yeah, and I think that he probably chose that as a counterpoint to the sort of red magenta color, because it is, complementary to that.
Yeah.
I think that it's a fun tattoo. It's charming. It's beautifully rendered. All the things that we've been talking about have really been about its clarity from a distance. Now I'm looking at it from a distance. And that's really where all of my criticisms come in, is when looking at it from a distance like that. The value of the shell and the body being fairly similar becomes an issue when you're looking at it from a distance.
Well, and one thing I've noticed throughout this critique session is most of the tattoos that we've looked at, where we've found flaws in these tattoos usually resides in either a lack of black. Just the use of more black seems like it could solve a lot of problems, or just the lack of leaving either some kind of skin tone or a thicker line, to really bring out, things in the foreground. I think that's kind of a sum up of every problem that we've seen in the tattoos tonight, is either a lack of just some really saturated blacks, or just a lack of attention to, if this is in the foreground, really make it in the foreground.
Well, I think the bottom line is we're talking about clarity and readability, because otherwise these are great tattoos. They're well drawn. They're nicely rendered, nicely colored. Dynamite technique on all of them. So really, it's about clarity, and the clarity that you see now, or that when you're looking at it from a distance, is also going to pertain to how it's going to age.
So this is the tattoo I did today. I don't know how long it took me, about 6 hours.
I'm gonna try to find ways to put more solid black or darks into a tattoo like this, even without outlines. Where you've got the black in the wings. Is really helping for me, and my eye wants more of it. I want to find a way to push some silhouettes of the flowers behind the head of the bird, maybe. Just try to come up with some ways to sneak that darkness in there.
So that the flowers would be switching. Some of them would be light on a richer background, and you have some that would go silhouetted in front of a lighter background.
Yeah, I might flip that. The flower shape into silhouette and carefully place it behind the head of the bird, just to create really high contrast there, and then have the flowers be rendered the way they are, more in the foreground, and have them pass in front of the bird, just to create that extra layer of depth. But Michele, this is a thing that you've been doing your whole tattoo career, as far as avoiding the dark and avoiding outlines, and so
I'm trying to say the most I can with the least, kind of create a lighter weight of a tattoo, but still make it strong and graphic in its own way. Find that delicate balance.
Yeah, well, I think it's unfair to say that tattoos have to have black. And I think that's just an overgeneralization and simplification of the issue. They need to have contrast. And you've found some ways to sneak that contrast in here. The way you went dark on the edge of the bird head, and then went totally to skin, just on the outside of that. You're getting that contrast in there. Just for me, my personal taste, I'd like to see it go a little further. just keep pushing the dark values in more and more.
Of course, we do know from experience that black just tends to be more reliable in aging, and a lot of people, I think, because of that, will default to it. And I think that's one of the things that Michele's trying not to do. But at the same time, we know how much black will lighten in the course of healing, and then colors, they'll lighten all kinds of different amounts. Some of them will lighten just a little, some of them will lighten a whole lot.
I don't have a problem with black at all. I used to have a problem with it when I started tattooing because I was from the 90s and everything was so black in the 90s. Everything was shaded before it was colored, and I had a lot of early work on me that felt very heavy and dense. But the new level that tattooing has gone with, which all you guys respectively do beautifully, including Guy, all of you guys, I love, and I'm open to putting more black in my work, but selectively and without outlines.
I think selective use of black is really where it makes the most impact. And on this tattoo, what I like is that, there's black in the foreground, in the object that's in the foreground, being the bird, and then a lack of it in the background. And I make that decision a lot in my tattoos where I decide that if I'm gonna put black in, I either make it the background or I make it the foreground. I don't use it in both usually. It's usually one or the other. So on this, with it being majority in the bird, I like that, and I like that. That kind of helps that bird stand out against that background. I think the background could go even lighter. I think that there's a lot of midtones in the background, and I think you could even push those further to lighter tones and really make the bird, dark and midtones, and then the background, your lighter tones.
Yeah, it becomes like a matter of comparison, I think.
Yeah.
With if you push like a little more dark in the foreground, like if there was a little bit of black maybe used in the back of the bird's head and maybe like near the chest a little bit, I think it would have looked like there was actually less black overall, because right now I would say like your eye is drawn to that back wing because it's a very selective use of black. Yeah, like if it had shown up a little bit in a couple other places, I think your eye would go towards the black a little bit less, and it would have made the bird as a whole the focal point a little bit more. And I think too, you can cheat with black. Like if you put down, black and then like buffer it out and then blend kind of into color, your eye won't read it necessarily as like, oh yeah, that's black. It'll just be like, oh, that's just a darker, that's a darker version of brown or ochre or whatever.
Use it just to bring those tones a little darker, bring the value just a little darker in the bird, and leave it out of that background entirely.
Yeah, I've noticed in the past where selective, uses of strong, small areas of black can actually make the whole piece look brighter instead of darker. It's counterintuitive, but it does have that effect when it's done right.
And all light can look just as muddy as all dark. And
right.
Guys always telling me that, like if I'm not selective about it, it's going to look muddy no matter whether it's light or dark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think the background really is like effective. Like I'm really like, I'm totally comfortable with pretty much all aspects of the background, because I think too, as the tattoo like ages, the background's almost going to become even stronger, for the whole piece, where, colors will become like softer and fuzzier just by natural aging, and it's going to push the bird even like more towards the viewer.
Hey Michele, one thought about the composition here.
Sure, yeah.
If you see that that stick that is following the top edge of the wing,
yeah,
that's the kind of thing that sort of, I feel like there's two equal shapes going on. Like the top edge of the wing almost looks like the stick, and vice versa. And there's a little bit of confusion there. One thing that you can kind of watch out for is having the foreground and the background be parallel. You know, if you could just like shift that stick a little bit more to where it clearly goes under the wing, that can really help. We call that
and then light stick and darker with the top edge of the wing would also help.
Yeah. Just
with the same value to compete, right?
Yep.
Right.
I can still go back in. I can gray it out and put black in the top of the wing.
Yep.
Yeah, that would do it. And you know, this use of white in the flowers in the background it's kind of pulling them forward, you know. And if you could avoid using the white in the background and just use it in specific moments in the bird, kind of push those apart a little bit more too.
Yeah, you get more plane separation.
I guess I was challenged because I wanted to make the flowers look neutral and not a color. So I didn't know how to leave them alone without putting white in them.
Yeah, without them looking unfinished.
Yeah, that was my challenge that I was experiencing because I was afraid. I wanted to keep it somewhat subdued around the bird, like not have it be super saturated with color, but still kind of airy.
That's a fun thing that Kelly and I have both been playing with, is using negative, you know, using just flash as a tone to describe things in the background or the foreground, and leaving white out, you know, and really trying to reserve white for things that are absolutely in the foreground or are the highlight or the focus of the tattoo. And I think that would definitely benefit this tattoo as well, as, you know, the flowers in the background. Her skin's really white, so there's really, it is kind of one of those things. I agree with Russ that the bird could use the white highlights, but everything in the background could really go without it.
Awesome.
So hey everyone, we have doubled the length of our show from 1 hour to 2. And for those of you who have stuck around and listened to the whole thing, thank you for hearing us out, and to our amazing guests.
Thank you guys. You guys are awesome.
This is an incredible conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
We plan to have you both on again.
Yeah, we want you back. Please come back. And I love all three of your artwork a lot. It's just amazing. It flows beautifully, and you guys draw really well. Back
to the critique thing. Anybody out there who's listening who is an owner of Reinventing the Tattoo, I do have a forum. I'm there every day. If anybody has been to the forum and said, oh, this place is a ghost town, I'm there every day now. So come post stuff, get critiqued. Don't be afraid. It's a good thing to do.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And thanks again, everyone. Tune in 2 weeks. We'll be having Juan Salgado. Next one after that will be all about collaborations. And
all these guys will be back because they're great and we have more things to talk about.
Yes. So once again, thank you all for coming. Thank everybody for listening. Tune in 2 weeks. And we hope to hear your questions, and we hope to have time to answer more of them next time.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night.